What happens when a prince who once walked away from royal duties finds himself face to face with a daytime talk show host who refuses to back down? In just 35 seconds, a casual conversation transforms into a verbal battlefield that ends with security escorting a member of the royal family off set. This is the story of how one heated exchange exposed entitlement, shattered expectations, and left an entire studio audience in stunned silence. The lights are bright. The cameras are rolling. Mark Consuelos sits behind his desk with that familiar warm smile, the one that has welcomed countless guests over the years. Today is supposed to be special. Prince Harry is scheduled to appear, promoting a new charitable initiative focused on mental health awareness for veterans. The audience buzzes with excitement. Yet, this is the kind of booking that makes headlines, the kind that sends ratings through the roof. Mark opens with his usual charm. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very special guest today, Prince Harry. The applause is thunderous. The prince walks out in a tailored navy suit, waving to the crowd. He takes his seat, adjusts his jacket, and settles in with a confident smile. The first few minutes go smoothly. Mark asks about the charity, about the importance of mental health support, about how the organization plans to make a difference. Harry answers with practiced ease, hitting all the talking points his team prepared. The conversation flows naturally, or at least it seems to. Then Mark shifts gears. This is what he does best, finding the real story beneath the polished surface. "You know I have to ask," Mark says. Leaning forward slightly, there has been a lot of discussion about transparency in charity work. Can you walk us through exactly how donations to your foundation are allocated? People want to know their money is going directly to veterans. The question is fair, reasonable, the kind any journalist worth their salt would ask. But Harry's expression shifts. The easy smile tightens. "Well, that is all publicly available information," he says, his tone cooling. "Anyone can look at our annual reports." Mark nods, keeping his voice friendly. "Sure, absolutely. But since we have you here, since people are watching right now, maybe you could just give us a general breakdown. What percentage goes to administrative costs versus direct support?" Harry shifts in his seat. "But I do not think this is the appropriate forum for that kind of detailed financial discussion. We are here to talk about the mission, about helping people." There is a pause. Mark does not let it go. "With respect, isn't transparency part of the mission? When you are asking people to donate their hard-earned money, don't they deserve to know these details?" The temperature in the studio drops. Harry's jaw tightens. "I find it quite interesting," he says slowly, "that you are choosing to focus on this rather than the actual work we are doing. Typical media behavior, always looking for the negative angle." Mark remains calm, professional. His experience shows. "I'm just asking questions I think our audience would want answered. There is nothing negative about transparency." Harry leans back, crossing his arms. "You know what your problem is? You people in the media, you build someone up just to tear them down. You pretend to care about accountability, but really you just want a headline." The audience murmurs. Mark's producers exchange glances from the wings. This is not going according to plan, but Mark keeps his composure. "I appreciate your perspective, but I have to disagree. Asking legitimate questions about how charitable donations are used is not about tearing anyone down. It is about responsible journalism." "Responsible journalism?" Harry scoffs. "Is that what you call this? Ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to talk about helping veterans?" Mark's tone remains even, measured. Nobody is ambushing anyone. These are standard questions that any organization asking for public donations should expect to answer. Harry's face flushes. "Standard questions? Do you know who you are talking to? Do you have any idea what I have sacrificed, what my family has been through?" There it is. The moment the conversation crosses a line, Mark sits up straighter. "I am talking to someone who is asking the American public for their money. That is who I am talking to. And in this country, it does not matter who you are or what title you have. If you want people's trust, you answer their questions. The studio goes quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Harry stares at Mark, his face reddening. "How dare you?" he says quietly. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Mark does not flinch. "I am speaking to you the same way I would speak to any guest who comes on this show. With respect, but also with honesty. If that is a problem, I am sorry you feel that way." Harry stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. I came here to do something good, to raise awareness for a cause that matters, and you turn it into this interrogation." Mark remains seated, his voice calm. Asking where donated money goes is not an interrogation. It is due diligence. Due diligence? Harry's voice rises. "You want to talk about due diligence? Maybe you should do some due diligence on your own show. Maybe you should look at how you treat your guests, how you manufacture controversy for ratings." The audience gasps. Mark's expression hardens slightly, but he maintains control. "I have been doing this for a long time. I ask tough questions. I hold people accountable. That is my job. If you cannot handle basic questions about financial transparency, maybe you should not be running a charity." "That does it." Harry explodes. "Maybe I should not be running a charity. Maybe you should not be hosting a show. Do you know what I could do with one phone call? Do you understand the kind of influence I have?" Mark stands now too, facing his guest directly. His voice remains steady, but there is steel in it. "Is that a threat? Are you actually threatening me on my own show?" "It is not a threat," Harry snaps. "It is a fact. I have connections you could not even dream of. People who would pull this show off the air in a heartbeat if I asked them to." Mark shakes his head slowly. "Wow, just wow. You know what? I have interviewed presidents. I have interviewed world leaders. I have interviewed people who actually change lives every single day. And not one of them has ever sat in that chair and tried to intimidate me. Not one." Harry points a finger at Mark. "You do not get to talk to me like this. You are nothing but a talk show host, a glorified entertainer. I am royalty. I have spent my entire life in service while you sit here playing games for cameras." The audience erupts. Some people gasp. Others boo. Mark raises a hand to calm them. "You know what? You are right about one thing. I am a talk show host. That is my job. And part of my job is making sure that when someone comes on this show asking for money from hardworking Americans, they can answer simple questions about where that money goes. If you cannot do that, if all you can do is throw around your title and make threats, then maybe you should leave." Harry's face is crimson. Fine. I will leave. But you have just made the biggest mistake of your career. You have no idea what you have done." He rips off his microphone, the wire tangling as he yanks it free. Mark signals to someone off camera. "Actually, let me save you the trouble. Security, can you please escort our guest out?" Harry freezes. "You are having me removed? You are having me removed?" "You just threatened me on national television," Mark says firmly. "You refused to answer legitimate questions. You insulted me. You insulted this show, and you insulted everyone watching by suggesting that your title makes you above basic accountability. So yes, I am asking you to leave." Two security guards appear from the wings. They are professional, courteous, but firm. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of them says. Harry looks around wildly, as if expecting someone to intervene. Nobody does. The audience watches in complete silence. The prince's handlers rush forward from backstage, their faces pale with panic. "This is unbelievable," Harry sputters. This is discrimination. You are treating me like a common criminal." Mark's voice cuts through. "No, I am treating you like anyone else who cannot behave professionally on my show. Title or no title, that is how it works here." One of Harry's handlers tries to smooth things over. Perhaps we can all just take a breath. Maybe step away for a moment. There is nothing to step away from, Mark interrupts. Your client had an opportunity to have a respectful conversation, and he chose to make threats instead. The interview is over. Harry shakes off the security guard's gentle guidance. Do not touch me. I will walk out myself. He turns to face Mark one last time. You are going to regret this. I promise you that. Mark meets his gaze steadily. The only thing I regret is that you came here more interested in protecting your image than being honest with people who want to support your cause. Harry storms toward the exit, his handlers scrambling to keep up. Just before he reaches the door, he spins around. You know what your problem is? You are a nobody trying to make yourself feel important by taking down people who actually matter. Mark does not take the bait. If asking questions makes me a nobody, then I am proud to be one. The prince turns on his heel and disappears through the exit. The studio door slams shut behind him with a resounding thud that echoes through the silent studio. For a moment, nobody moves. Nobody speaks. The audience sits frozen, processing what they just witnessed. Mark walks back to his desk, his movements deliberate and calm. He sits down, adjusts his notes, and looks directly at the camera. Well, he says with a slight exhale, that was certainly not how I expected this segment to go. A nervous laugh ripples through the audience. Mark continues. Look, I want to be clear about something. I have nothing against our guest personally. I genuinely hope his charity does good work and helps veterans who desperately need support. But I also believe that when you ask the public for their money, you owe them transparency. You owe them answers, and no title, no matter how prestigious. She changes that. The audience applauds. It starts slowly, then builds into genuine, sustained clapping. Mark nods in acknowledgement. This show has always been about honest conversations. Sometimes those conversations are fun and light. Sometimes they are serious. And sometimes, apparently, they get very heated. But I would rather have a difficult, honest conversation than an easy, dishonest one. He pauses, letting the moment settle. We had a whole segment planned with activities and games. Obviously, that is not happening now. So instead, I want to talk to you, the audience, and you watching at home. When you donate to a charity, any charity, you have every right to ask questions. You have every right to know where your money is going. Do not let anyone, and I mean anyone, make you feel bad for asking. The camera stays tight on Mark's face. His sincerity is evident. Look, I get it. We put people on pedestals. We see someone with a famous name or a royal title, and we think they must be above questioning. But that is exactly backwards. The more influential someone is, the more important it is to ask questions. Power without accountability is dangerous, whether you are a prince or a president, or just a regular person with a platform. Behind the scenes, his producers are frantically reworking the rest of the show, but Mark seems in no hurry to move on. This moment matters, and he knows it. I have been in this business a long time. I have had tense interviews before. I have had guests walk out before. It comes with the territory when you ask real questions instead of just lobbing softballs. And I am okay with that. I would rather be known as someone who asks tough questions than someone who lets people skate by on their reputation. He glances at his notes, then back at the camera. You know what bothered me most about that exchange? It was not the anger. It was not even the threats. It was the assumption that asking for accountability was somehow disrespectful. That wanting to know how donated money is spent was an attack. That is the attitude that lets bad things happen. That is how people get taken advantage of. The audience is completely engaged now, hanging on every word. Mark leans forward slightly. Here is what I believe. If you are doing good work, if you are really helping people, then you should be proud to explain exactly how you are doing it. You should welcome questions. You should want people to understand where their support is going. The fact that our guest got so defensive about such a basic question, that tells you something. He sits back again. Now, am I saying there is definitely something wrong with that particular charity? No, I do not know. That is why I was asking. Maybe everything is completely above board. Maybe there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for why he did not want to get into specifics. But the way to handle that is to say, hey, I do not have those exact numbers in front of me right now, but here is generally how we operate. And you can find detailed breakdowns on our website. That is transparency. That is accountability. Mark takes a sip of water from the mug on his desk. The audience waits patiently. When he sets it down, he continues. What you do not do is get defensive. You do not attack the person asking questions. You definitely do not start throwing around threats about your connections and influence. Because the moment you do that, you have already lost the argument. You have shown that you do not have a good answer. So you are trying to intimidate people into not asking. His voice hardens slightly. And let me be crystal clear about something. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to threaten me or this show and think that is okay. I do not care who you are. I do not care what family you come from. I do not care how many palaces you have lived in. You do not get to come into this studio and try to bully me for doing my job. The applause is immediate and thunderous. Mark waits for it to die down. Thank you. But honestly, this is not about me feeling tough or standing up to some big important person. This is about the principle. This is about maintaining a space where journalists can ask questions without fear. Because if we lose that, if people start self-censoring because they are afraid of who they might offend, then we have lost something really important. He looks around the studio, at the audience, at the crew, then back to the camera. I know some people watching probably think I was too harsh. Maybe you think I should have been more deferential, more polite, and I respect that opinion. But here's the thing. Politeness is important. Respect is important. But truth is more important. And sometimes telling the truth means having uncomfortable conversations. It means not backing down when someone tries to use their status to avoid answering questions. Mark shuffles his papers. A signal that he is preparing to move on, but not quite ready yet. You know, when I first started in this business, someone gave me advice. They said, treat everyone the same. Do not be meaner to people with less power, but do not be softer on people with more power. Just be fair. Ask everyone the same tough questions. Hold everyone to the same standard. And that is what I try to do every single day. He pauses. Today was a test of that principle, and I hope, that I lived up to it. I asked the same questions I would ask any charity director. I maintained the same standard I would maintain for any guest. The fact that it went sideways, well, that was not my choice. I gave every opportunity for a productive conversation. That door was slammed shut from the other side. Finally, Mark takes a breath and smiles slightly, trying to lighten the mood. Okay, I think I have talked about this enough. We still have a show to do. We have other guests coming up. People who I promise will not storm off set. At least I hope they will not. At this point, who knows? The audience laughs, the tension finally breaking. But the moment, the confrontation, the raw display of entitlement meeting accountability, that will not be forgotten. In those 35 seconds from the first threat to the security escort, everything changed. A prince showed the world that underneath the charitable facade was someone who believed his title made him untouchable. And a talk show host showed that in his studio, on his stage, everyone plays by the same rules. Mark Consuelos proved something important that day. He proved that asking questions is not disrespectful, that holding powerful people accountable is not an attack, that transparency matters more than titles, and that sometimes the most important thing a journalist can do is simply refuse to back down when someone tries to intimidate them into silence. The prince walked into that studio expecting deference, expecting softball questions, expecting his title to shield him from scrutiny. He walked out escorted by security, his reputation damaged, his charity facing more questions than ever. All because he could not handle being treated like everyone else. All because he thought he was above accountability. And Mark? Mark went to commercial break, regrouped with his team, and came back to finish the show. Because that is what professionals do. They do not need security escorts. They do not make threats. They just do their jobs, a day in and day out, asking the questions that need to be asked, regardless of who is sitting in the guest chair. The clash between Mark Consuelos and Prince Harry was not planned. It was not scripted. It was a genuine moment of conflict between two very different worldviews. On one side, someone who believed his status entitled him to special treatment, to freedom from difficult questions, to the ability to shut down conversations he did not like. On the other side, someone who believed that everyone, regardless of title, should be held to the same standard of transparency and accountability. When those worldviews collided, there was always going to be only one outcome. Either Mark would back down, would apologize, would retreat from asking legitimate questions, or the prince would have to leave. And in that moment, in with cameras rolling and an audience watching, Mark made his choice. He chose his principles over pleasing a powerful guest. He chose truth over comfort. He chose to do his job, even when it got uncomfortable. That is what made the moment so powerful. It was not just about one interview gone wrong. It was about what we expect from our media, from our journalists, from the people we trust to ask questions on our behalf. Do we want them to bow and scrape before powerful people? Or do we want them to treat everyone the same, to ask the tough questions, regardless of who might get offended? Mark Consuelos gave his answer. He asked the questions. He did not back down. He refused to be intimidated. And when his guest could not handle that basic level of accountability, when threats started flying instead of answers, Mark did what needed to be done. He ended the interview. He had security escort his guest out. He maintained the integrity of his show and his profession. The prince wanted respect, but respect is earned, not demanded. It comes from being honest, from being transparent, from treating others with the same courtesy you expect for yourself. It does not come from making threats. It does not come from throwing your title around. It does not come from trying to intimidate people into silence. In 35 seconds, a routine interview became a masterclass in what happens when entitlement meets accountability. When someone used to special treatment encounters, someone committed to treating everyone the same. When threats and bluster run up against calm professionalism. The result was inevitable. One person maintained their dignity and their principles. The other stormed off in a rage, escorted by security, having exposed exactly the kind of character that makes tough questions necessary in the first place. Mark Consuelos sat behind his desk that day and did something simple but profound. He asked a question, a fair question, a reasonable question. And when he did not get an answer, when he got threats instead, he did not flinch. He did not apologize. He stood his ground. In doing so, he reminded everyone watching that in a democracy, in a free society, nobody is above questioning. Nobody gets a pass just because of their last name, or their family history, or their connections. This is the story of a dramatic talk show moment, but it is also the story of something bigger. It is the story of why journalism matters. Why asking questions matters. Why holding powerful people accountable matters. And why we should all be grateful for the Mark Consueloses of the world, the people who refuse to be intimidated, who refuse to back down, who keep asking questions even when it makes powerful people uncomfortable. Because without them, without people willing to risk conflict for the sake of truth, we would all be worse off. The powerful would become more powerful. The entitled would become more entitled, and the rest of us would never get the answers we deserve. That confrontation in the studio was raw and real. It stripped away all the polish and revealed something essential about character under pressure. Mark stayed calm while his guest fell apart. Mark stayed professional while his guest made threats. Mark stayed focused on the truth while his guest tried to use power to avoid it.